My guest at this time is a former Democratic presidential candidate and an American entrepreneur. It is Andrew Yang. Andrew, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me here today.
It's great to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Well, of course, we broke the news last week regarding WWE and Vince McMahon's third-party edict aimed at limiting the way their talent does business with these outside parties. My question to you, Andrew, is how does Vince McMahon continue to get away with things like this that he does with his talent?
A lot of it, Nick, is that wrestlers are afraid to speak out. And I've had wrestlers, past and present, reach out to me and say that Vince has been getting away with exploitation of wrestlers, calling them independent contractors while controlling their activities for years and years. A lot of it's just that they're a quasi-monopoly, and wrestlers fear that if they do try and unionize or organize in any way that Vince doesn't like, that they'll never work again.
Yeah, no, that seems pretty straight to the point. And like knowing that, well, first of all, when did this get on your radar? Like, when did you first realize the way that Vince McMahon was treating his wrestlers and that it wasn't right? Do you know?
It was literally decades ago.
Really?
I was a wrestling fan from childhood in the 80s. And when I became old enough to understand a bit of how the rules work around employees, independent contractors, benefits, it was clear the WWE was exploiting performers back then. And back then, there wasn't much I could do about it. Obviously, I was just like another fan.
Right.
But I've known for quite some time, and I think a lot of fans have known for a long time, Nick, that performers were being unfairly treated and miscategorized.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my question to you then, Andrew, is like knowing this, like why hasn't Congress, the federal government, anybody ever stepped in to address the way that WWE is treating its talent?
A lot of it is that wrestling, for some reason, seems to fall outside the bounds of mainstream political consideration, which strikes me as very bizarre. I mean, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry that millions of fans tune into every single week. So wouldn't you be attentive to the fact that there are clear violations of employment law going on at any given time? Part of it, too, is that these labor issues tend to fall under the National Labor Relations Board, which typically intervenes if there are attempts to unionize that are brought to them or retaliation claims that are brought to them. And because the WWE has such a stranglehold on the livelihood of so many wrestlers, there haven't been people that have even raised an action with the National Labor Relations Board in order for it to reach a certain point.
Oh, okay. Wonder. And if there is a change in administration, and I know that you were asked earlier if you're interested in possibly being a part of that administration, would you make this a priority to bring that to this board and see about something being done for these performers?
I would, and we're going to get it done. I mean, there have been performers that have reached out to me, again, both past and present, who have very direct experience and knowledge with how closely the WWE controls and manages performer activities, while claiming on the other hand that, oh no, you're an independent contractor, you're a free agent, you can do whatever you want, which really makes no sense on the face of it. I mean, We all know that talent can't do a whole host of things. So it's going to remain a priority for me until this job gets done. And I'm confident that if Joe and Kamala take the White House later this year, that I'll be in position to help these performers get what's been owed to them for years.
Have you talked to Joe or Kamala at all about this particular issue? Is this something that has ever come up when you're having conversations with them?
I talked to Joe and Kamala in the incidents of the campaigns and helping them try to win. I have not had this conversation with them, no, but there will be due time. Again, first things first, we have to get Trump out and win, but then after that, this is not going anywhere from my agenda, and it's something that I can get done, I believe, pretty straightforwardly.
Good. Well, I know you tweeted out that you thought that Vince should hope that Donald Trump stays in office to help protect him and keep his corrupt business practices going, I think, as you put it. Do you get the vibe that Donald Trump and Vince McMahon are actively communicating and working together on a regular basis regarding this and other issues?
Well, we all know that they have a long-standing relationship that spans decades, and so I think it would be strange to imagine that they're not in touch.
Yeah.
And I think that Vince knows having a friend in the White House has been very helpful to him on several levels. My hope is that Vince finally does the right thing. He can claim to do it of his own volition, but I mean, it's doubtful that he would do the right thing, given that it's been decades of long-standing abuses and corruption on this side.
Right.
But if he doesn't do the right thing in the next number of weeks, we're going to help him we're going to do the right thing for him. And
Wow.
I said in another context, it would give me great pleasure. It would, because these wrestlers have been putting their life and limb on the line to help make Vince rich for years and decades. They've been mistreated. They deserve better. And to me, this is an important emblem of what's going on in American life, Nick, where millions of Americans tune in and watch these performers who put years into their craft every single week. The fact that they're getting exploited to this level is completely wrong. And this is something that most Americans would 100% agree with if they knew the ins and outs of just how egregious Vince's mistreatment is.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to get your take on was, obviously we've all started hearing these Bob Woodward, clips, and there was the one where Trump obviously said he was going to be playing down the pandemic, right? So he didn't want to cause a panic or whatever he may be saying. Do you think that there's something to the idea that WWE maybe helped him with that narrative by continuing to do shows right as the pandemic was breaking and never taking a moment to pause?
I doubt that those two things were related, just insofar as I think that Vince and WWE were like, we're going to keep the show going hell or high water because we have a broadcast TV deal. We have shareholders that we have to keep happy. I think that was the reason why they wanted to make sure that they could continue to perform and have shows.
Sure, and with what we've heard come out of the Performance Center, these dozens of people that got sick and everything like that, do you think an investigation is due to the way WWE carried itself during that very delicate period of time right after the pandemic broke out?
Well, I think it's very much related, Nick, in that if you have employees who feel like they have no choice but to come and perform for you, even if they might have a vulnerable person in the household or they just don't want to perform, but they feel like they're going to lose their livelihood if they don't perform, that's wrong. And that could easily have been the case in some of these instances where performers, WWE would be like, well, it's your choice, but then the threat is like, and if you decide not to, you're going to lose your job.
Right.
Given the tenuous nature of employment in the WWE, I'm sure that there were many wrestlers who had deep reservations about performing, but felt like they had no choice but to keep their jobs and do something they did not want to do.
Yeah. And one of the other quotes I wanted to ask you about from these Woodward clips, because they're the gift that never keeps giving. He also told Woodward that in regards to Mohammed bin Salman, he saved his ass in regards to getting Congress to leave him alone following the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. What do you think about WWE's relationship with Saudi Arabia? Do you think they should have been allowed to continue to do shows after the murder of Khashoggi?
Well, clearly, they're dealing with people who've done unspeakable, despicable things. And this is something that many American companies have had to navigate, where if a foreign government does something reprehensible, what does that mean for your dealings with that government? That's something that every company and every leadership team has to determine for themselves. But certainly, if I were in charge of WWE, I would not have been anywhere near taking money from the Saudis, given their literal dismemberment of a journalist for political reasons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. American resident to boot. And, the other thing I wanted to ask you is there was that story that came out that's still, I believe, being taken up in the courts in some way, of that WWE plane that was mysteriously, delayed for a day or so in Saudi Arabia following the Crown Jewel. That's always struck me as so weird that potentially there's, a group of Americans that are, held in a situation where they feel uncomfortable. Are you surprised that no action was taken there? Nobody looked deeper into what was going on with that particular incident?
Yeah, there was a mystery, and certainly there are a lot of unanswered questions associated with a lot of things that were coming out of that trip. And to me, unfortunately, our visibility into some of the happenings in Saudi Arabia isn't what we hoped it would be.
Yeah. I know you've talked about AEW as of late as well. Do you see a fundamental difference between the way AEW treats their talents as opposed to the way that WWE is treating theirs? Or do you feel like there's room for AEW to reform as well?
I think AEW has been a leader in terms of being talent friendly, and you can see it with the fact that several wrestlers were integral to the formation of AEW. When I've talked to folks who work for AEW, they really like the fact that they can perform for other promotions, which obviously, is not something that's happening at a WWE.
Sure.
So I do think that AEW has a very different attitude towards its talent, and AEW is an up and coming promotion that is doing the right thing by talent, in part because they know that that's going to be a way they can compete and be successful. The WWE is in a very different position where they're a quasi-monopoly, and they're plugging wrestlers into a machine that they feel like they've built, and they feel like any wrestler is lucky to be there, and they need to keep their mouth shut. So it seems like a very different approach to talent because the companies are in very different places and have different cultures.
Do you think that with the wrestlers on both sides, AEW and WWE, do you think that they should qualify for SAG? Do you think this should be an issue where SAG should intervene to make sure these talents are better protected since they are on TV every week?
I think that's one approach that could really work wonders. And if you were to ask professional wrestlers, how many of you would like to be part of the Screen Actors Guild, I have a feeling you'd see every single hand go up because, SAG affords tremendous protections to the other actors and actresses who are on screen every day and every week. And the parallels are almost 100%, where if you're a professional wrestler, you are inhabiting a character, you are given storylines and plots. In some cases, you're given actual lines. You rehearse, you perform in front of a televised audience. So they should be members of SAG, and that would be transformative for the industry. Wrestling has been in the dark in terms of if it's being included in things like SAG because of its roots. But if you look up at the reality now, you're talking about hours and hours of scripted TV programming every week, and the wrestlers are the talent. So by rights, they should be considered for SAG membership and all of its protections.
Yeah. Well, one of the last things I wanted to ask you about, Andrew, and this time just flew right by. Hopefully, maybe down the road I can have you back. But a big thing that I just kind of wanted to get your take on in general was, how do you feel pro wrestling has affected American politics? I feel like, not just the fact that Trump's like a WWE Hall of Famer, but just the way politicians are packaged and sold anymore feels very much like a WWE superstar to me.
No, I joked with someone that I thought that professional wrestling and politics have a lot in common. My sense of things is that most political figures and their teams don't watch pro wrestling. I may be something of an exception in this regard.
Sure.
But I agree with you that the parallels are real, and that pro wrestling certainly had an enormous impact on me growing up. And has influenced our culture in profound ways. So, to me, the impact on politics is unclear, but I have a feeling that that politics is about to start impacting wrestling in a more real way than has been true in the past.
Sure. And do you mean that just by the fact that Vince McMahon might actually get touched now, and that he may not be untouchable like he was before?
What I said in another conversation is that Vince has been getting away with exploitation of his performers for decades, and the bill is coming due. And I plan on being one of the people that presents him that bill and gets him to pay it.
Damn. All right. Well, Andrew, I want to thank you so much for the time. Before we let you go here, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about Yang Speaks and Humanity Forward. What are these? That you're working on here?
Well, thanks, Nick. Yang Speaks is a podcast that we record every week. So we have conversations with leaders in various fields. We actually have a couple of pro wrestlers coming on soon, so that should be a lot of fun, in part because of this conversation that you and I just shared. Humanity Forward is my organization that's pushing forward the ideas of my campaign, primarily that human value and economic value are not the same things, that all people have intrinsic value, including certainly pro wrestlers who are putting their lives on the line, but really all of us. And so we are giving money to people who are struggling right now. We've distributed over $8 million in economic relief to date. So thank you to everyone who's contributed. And we're also supporting various campaigns and political candidates who are supportive of our mission to humanize the economy. So that's movehumanityforward.com and Yang Speaks. But you'll be seeing a lot more of me and the Yang Gang in the days to come in these circles and the pro wrestling news, hopefully with some results